There are plenty who say that Tom Brady is the NFL's greatest of all time. And there are some who say Eminem is rap's greatest of all time. And then there are some who would argue with both of those takes. We're going to tell you who our possible greatest of all times that might have a little bit of debate with them are coming up next on today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday episode of Locked On NFL, your daily podcast covering the National Football League, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. I'm David Harrison. He is Tony Wiggins. We are credential members of the media and your hosts of the Locked On Commanders and Locked On Jags podcast, respectively, on top of being your Friday duo here on Locked On NFL, which is with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. We appreciate your continued support for this show and your favorite Locked On programs. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create your account, use the promo code Locked On NFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode, we're going to have a little bit of fun here. There's plenty of time for seriousness coming up. Training camp is right around the corner. We got all kinds of real football to talk about, but Wig, we are going to have some fun because on Friday, Eminem, arguably the greatest rapper of all time, heavily argued, arguably the greatest rapper of all time, is dropping a new album titled, let me pull this up so I make sure I don't mess it up, The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace. I never took French. But it basically means a final blow or to give a kill shot. And to me, that sounds like this might be Eminem's last album.
Sounds like
it's his last album. What a great career. 15-year-old me is crying in his Jinko jeans because this is Eminem's final album. So there's an image for you all, if you know what those were, if you're back from the 90s, to go back and take a look at. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through Eminem's top 10 track list, and we're going to use those as player superlatives. If you don't get it, don't worry. We're going to explain it as we get into it. But we're going to start off, Wig. Like I said, Eminem is the highly debated greatest of all time. Some people say he is. Some people say there's no way he is. So it got us thinking, who are the NFL players who could be the debated greatest of all time? A lot of people say Tom Brady, but who are the guys that you think could be in that conversation, but you know would have some haters and detractors?
Jerry Rice.
Oh, okay.
My personal GOAT, Lawrence Taylor.
I like it.
I think Lawrence Taylor is the best I've ever seen. The best football player. And I know we have this quarterback bias deal, right? Where, you know, it's the most important position. So the greatest player has always got to be a quarterback. I never had Joe Montana above Lawrence Taylor. To me, before Tom Brady, Lawrence Taylor was the best football player I have ever seen in my life, dog. Ever. Yep. And he was dominant. So you got these dudes, right? I'll tell you a quick story a guy I did radio with. All they did was look at stats. They said, well, he has 122 sacks. There's like 10 guys ahead of him. Bruce Smith has 200. And Reggie White didn't even play in the league that long. And so I asked Tom Coughlin to come over. This is when he was in between. This is before he became the Jaguars vice president, but he had got fired by the Giants. This was at the TPC championship here in Jacksonville. We did an interview with him. I said, Coach, I need 2 seconds. I said, and at the time, J.J. Watt was like 3-time champion and all of this stuff and 3 times MVP. And Aaron Donald was a young kid. And the dude swore by J.J. Watt. I said, Coach, how good was Lawrence Taylor? All Tom Coughlin could do was just go, geez, and shake his head. I said, you don't have to say nothing else. I looked at my radio partner. I said, that good enough for you? And he said, yeah, because you never saw Tom Coughlin do stuff like that. You never saw him overly rave about a player. You never saw him speechless. So I just said one more time, Coach, if you didn't see him play, you don't understand. He said, you can't understand. Yep. When you hear people talk about a player like that, it's amazing. I forgot who the player was. He said he wanted to be like Lawrence Taylor. And I think like Michael Irvin and somebody were interviewing, and they looked at each other and started laughing. Like you done lost your mind. For a dude to be 6'3", 245, now he's faster than running backs. You couldn't run at him. You couldn't run away from him. No. He to me changed the game. He really did put an exit ramp on the way football used to be played. And today there's still looking for Lawrence Taylors in the draft every single year, whether it's Thibodeau, whether it's whoever the stand-up dude is, they are still trying to find a game record like that. So Lawrence Taylor is my GOAT. By the way, Eminem ain't my GOAT. I love Eminem though, because I'm a big Dr. Dre guy. I think the greatest rapper I ever heard rap was Biggie.
That's a good one.
I think he's the greatest
I'll be honest with you.
I ever heard. Yep.
I'll be honest with you. In the rap game, I don't actually have a single GOAT, and I know that's kind of like on the fence, weak, like whatever, and that's fine. I'll take all the heat for that if you want to give it to me. But there's just so many good dudes out there that I just love the music. You know what I mean? And honestly, it kind of depends on the mood I'm in.
There you go.
Just kind of depends on the mood I'm in. What's the vibe right now? What's the mood? What's going on in my day, in my life, and that kind of depends on who I want to listen to. I'll be honest, like most time I drive to Commanders games, who I'm turning on? I'm turning on Logic. He's like one of the DMV's greatest right now. I'm turning on Logic, and like he's not even a greatest of history and all that. He's still doing his thing. So I mean that just kind of shows you the range of guys that you can go ahead and turn on. So I'm with you on that. As far as players are concerned, I think Jerry Rice is a really good one. Lawrence Taylor, I mean that might be like, we're going to talk about GOATs who don't necessarily get that GOAT label enough. That might be the guy, because you're looking at guys who changed the game. You want to look at guys who came in, and football is different forever because they played. I'm looking at a guy who actually is from the team that is my hometown team, technically, but I did not grow up a fan of this team. Played for the Denver Broncos. I'm saying defensive side of the ball. I'm going to Steve Atwater, because I think Steve Atwater couldn't play today's game, right? Steve Atwater.
I think they find a way. If Cam Chancellor can, Steve Atwater could. I think they'll find a way. They'll figure it out.
There you go. But Steve Atwater was kind of like, I think Steve Atwater kind of brought into, and this we can kind of tie this into Tom Brady and the GOAT conversation. Tom Brady's gone on record a lot of times saying that today's game excuses quarterbacks from making mistakes. Hold the ball too long, get hit in the wrong spot. You will excuse your mistake because the defensive player hit you in the wrong spot. Throw the ball over in the middle, leave your receiver hanging out to dry. He gets leveled by his safety. We'll throw a flag. We'll bail you out for your mistake. Too many times the offense gets bailed out for making their mistakes, usually on a quarterback, and the defense gets penalized for it. Steve Atwater is the kind of guy. Steve Atwater is not necessarily the first safety, but he's definitely one of the earliest safeties that made quarterbacks have to start thinking about, where am I throwing this ball? Where am I putting my receiver? And probably one of the first safeties that made receivers look at their quarterback and say, hey, bro, don't you put me over there. Don't put that ball in that spot. You need to put this ball in a better spot. So not to the level of Lawrence Taylor. I will concede that, because that's just easy, but not to the level of Lawrence Taylor. But I think Steve Atwater is another guy that kind of changed the game. I think Aaron Donald is a guy that most people would probably talk about as well. I look at a guy like Ronde Barber, who, if I just stripped the name, stripped the stats, and told you the measurables, and gave you the measurables of some team's third cornerback on their rosters today, you would take that third cornerback over Ronde. But when I give you Ronde's football IQ and his ability to make plays and his leadership ability and all those things, he becomes a Hall of Famer, right? One of my favorite stories that Ronde Barber's ever told, that I've ever heard him say or tell, was game against New Orleans Saints. And ironically enough, defensive coordinator Monty Kiffin was the defensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Monty Kiffin passed away Thursday, shortly before we actually hit record on this. So prayers out to the Kiffin family. Monty Kiffin means a lot to my football history and my football fandom, creator of the Tampa 2 and all those things. So prayers out to the Kiffin family, of course. But Ronde Barber was playing, and he got told by Coach Kiffin, hey, Ronde, like, you got to push these runs back in. Like, they're hitting us on the edge too much. You got to force this run back in, push it back in towards our big guys, let them finish the play. And he heard Kiff. He loved Kiff, respected Kiff, but he went out there and said, he's wrong. He's wrong on this one. I got to go make a play. I can see an opportunity. I can't remember who the running back was, but Saints running back, Ronde just knew, if I can get inside this edge block, if I can get inside that edge block, I could punch that ball out. He did, scoop and score. It just shows you the football IQ. It shows you that even though Ronde didn't necessarily have all the measurables that you want in a prototypical NFL corner, even back then, IQ, savvy, the intelligence to make those plays, always gonna leap over all those things. I think Ronde certainly should be in, if not just a DB GOAT conversation, he should certainly be in that conversation.
That type. So what you basically described with Ronde Barber is, I'm going to use pitching, and I'm going to use baseball. Okay. Not the biggest, ain't got the greatest fastball, but Greg Maddux is everything you just talked about. You just described a football version of Greg Maddux. Like, you can't point to one thing that he's better at than everybody, but guess what you can do? he's better every night doing all of those things that he's not better at than anybody else. He's so consistent, and he painted the plate. Ronde Barber's the same kind, man. I give you some credit. That's unique. Now you caught me with a little bit of a curveball. Speaking of baseball, but I like it. I like it.
Hey,
I
I'll
like
give
it
you credit for tying in. We got rap, we got football, we got baseball, we got a little bit of everything here to wrap up the week on Locked On NFL. Coming up next, we're going to run through the top 10, not our top 10, but a top 10 of Eminem's greatest hits, and we're going to tie player superlatives to those hits. It's going to be a lot of fun, so stick around. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Thanks again for being a Locked On NFL, your first listener, first view today and every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through today, like you do every single day. Make sure you come back on Monday. Kevin Ostreicher, Locked On Ravens, will be back to wrap up the biggest stories or the most fun stories around the National Football League as we get ever closer to training camp kicking off in less than 2 weeks. In the meantime, if you need more sports, Locked On Sports Today has got you covered. A free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest sports stories, all for free. Again, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's get into the meat of the episode here. Whether Eminem is your greatest of all time or not, he's certainly one of the highest selling, highest grossing, most impactful hip hop artists in the history of the genre, right? He's dropping what could be his last album. I don't know if it's been confirmed. I'm not a music journalist, okay? So maybe it has been confirmed. I'm just assuming might be his last album. He's got quite a hit list dating back to when he first came out. And Wig, we're going to look at this hit list from him according to High Snobiety. I don't really know. High Snobiety. I don't know. It's highsnobiety.com. They listed the top 25 best Eminem songs of all time. That's the list we're using. So if you hate the list, go to them and tell them we didn't make this list. But number one is Lose Yourself. And of course, from the 8 Mile soundtrack, definitely one of his most popular songs, won an Academy Award for Best Original Song. And here's how we're going to do this. So Lose Yourself is a song about taking advantage of your opportunities, about rising up. Maybe you were an underdog, about not letting your chance slip through your fingers. So when you hear that song, Wig, what NFL player does that remind you of?
We mention him. Every time I hear Lose Yourself, I think about Tom Brady.
Okay.
The reason why is because Tom Brady is this nice guy, this quiet guy, kind of unassuming. But when he comes out of the tunnel, you hear that, you see that let's effing go. You know what I mean? I remember they played Jalen Ramsey when the Jaguars went to Foxborough, and he was talking smack to Jalen Ramsey. And it's like, you don't poke that bear now. He did not care. And he does that. He talks smack before the game. He's like, he was in his 20th year, dude, running out there like it was his first game of the year. So Lose Yourself means I think it says something like you got to lose yourself in the moment. And I think he loses himself in the moment and becomes so myopically focused. I'm going to pull other sports here. Floyd Mayweather, Tiger Woods, and Michael Jordan are the guys that I compared him to when I say how myopically focused he can be on what is at stake and what is going on right now. So I hate to be redundant, but that's it. Tom Brady, I think Lose Yourself describes him. And he got more out of his body than his body said was there. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you could look at him and see what's inside of him, you say, hey, ain't much there. Like hell, it ain't much there, because his heart was so big and his head was so strong that I just think of Tom Brady every time. And Lose Yourself, by the way, is an anthem that they play every single time in these stadiums in the NFL, whenever a team's trying to rally and trying to get home, you hear that dun, 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 and the crowd absolutely goes crazy.
That is a big stadium song for sure. And I like it, man. I mean, look, Eminem is similar too. I mean, Tom Brady first jump on the scene, people didn't really give him a lot of credit, said, he's not going to be, he's not going to be all that and everything. People said the same thing about Eminem. And then 30 years or so later, they were still at the top of their game, or at least near the top of their game. I like that. I'm going to go a little bit of a different angle though, because here's my thing about the song Lose Yourself. Even though it says you only get one shot, Eminem's story is actually about a dude who gets more than one shot. He gets like 2, 3, 4 different shots, right? He gets up there, chokes, get back up there, get back up there, get back. But eventually he does take advantage of that opportunity. He finds himself and he wins the ultimate battle. I'm going to stick in Detroit. I'm going to pander like something else. I'm going to stick in Detroit. I'm going Jared Goff. Jared Goff cast out. Nobody thought he was nothing. Had mom spaghetti all up and down his jersey leaving Los Angeles. Goes to Detroit, seizes the moment, and now, I mean, Wig, I was in there for that divisional round playoff win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You talk about hearing that guitar riff hit in a stadium, and you hear a crowd going nuts. First of all, Eminem's in the stadium, so of course he's going to help the crowd get pumped up. But Jared Goff is a quarterback that nobody expected anything from, myself included. And whether it's all him or whether it's just some of him, and whatever the credit is, it doesn't matter. But bottom line is Jared Goff has gone to Detroit, taken advantage of the opportunity, has not let it slip through his fingers, and is certainly getting lost in the moment. So that's how we're going to kick this thing off, man. That's how we're going to do it. So song number 2, a little bit of a different vibe, Stan. And I think the interesting thing about the song Stan, it's a very dark song, right?
Yes.
But it also actually kicked off the phrase Stan. A lot of people don't really realize that's where that actually comes from, is being a stan of something is literally being like Stan from this Eminem song. He's just so obsessed with somebody, being a fan of somebody, that unfortunately in this song, it led to some pretty dark results, hopefully, if you're a stan of something. But when you hear the song Stan, just someone who's just obsessed, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it, is just someone who's just obsessed, crazy, just almost overly into what it is they're trying to accomplish. Wig, what is it you think of?
Dan Campbell. No, I'm just joking, because if he was a player, that would be it. So you know what I'll do? I'll stay right there in Detroit and honor Eminem by saying Aiden Hutchinson. I just think he plays in a way with the face paint. You know what? I'm going to say Aiden Hutchinson, but something just came to mind. His big brother, Crosby, out in Crosby with the Raiders.
Max Crosby's a good one.
Yeah, so they're kind of the same guy to me. And I know I ain't talking about because they're white guys that play defensive end. I'm just talking about the maniacal, crazy way that they approach the game, how they demonstratively play the game a certain way. I know Jaguar fans are going to get mad at me because Trayvon's a quiet dude, man. So this ain't got nothing to do with him. It's almost like you can't mention Aiden Hutchinson without having to give a little bit of a disclaimer about Trayvon. But I think the demonstrative way, I think he's an extension of his coach, and he's the perfect player for Dan Campbell, because Dan Campbell is actually who I really, really wanted to pick. But yeah, if he wasn't retired, I would say Antonio Brown.
Yeah. Oh, man, Antonio Brown.
Yeah, if he wasn't retired, I'd say, but for the sake of this one, I'd say the young kid in Detroit, man, who is an extension of his coach on the football field.
Antonio Brown, for totally different reasons. Antonio Brown would be a really good one. You know what? I am actually going to dip into the retirement pool here. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to go. So I think it's Stan, right? I think about a guy who every step of the way where he doesn't get what he's after, he just gets more and more mad. He just gets more and more mad, but also gets more and more driven. And again, the song is a very, I don't want to glorify what happens in the song.
Yeah.
So let's not mistake that. But Ray Lewis, every snap that dude did not get to the quarterback, he got more and more mad and more angry. And when he finally got to the quarterback, he took it out on him. So just because of that level of just deep rooted, just desire to get what I want. And if I don't get it, I'm going to get more and more angry until I get it. I'm going to go with Ray Lewis on that one. So that's how we're going to kick this off. We got a few more to come here before we wrap up this episode of Locked On NFL. So stick around. We're wrapping up Eminem. We're going to go as deep into Eminem's top 10. I don't know if we're going to get all the way to top 10. We're going as deep into Eminem's hits here in honor of his record release, but also tying it here to some NFL greats. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On NFL, Tony Wiggins, David Harrison here with you to wrap up the week. And wrapping up the week in the music industry, Eminem CD or record, album, I don't know what you call it anymore. The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace is coming out on Friday. It's out probably by the time you're even watching or listening to this episode. So in honor of that, we're going through some of Eminem's top songs in his history, and we're attaching players. So the next one is The Real Slim Shady. So The Real Slim Shady is an interesting song. Again, one of his collaborations, many collaborations with Dr. Dre. And in The Real Slim Shady, he basically talks about how there's a lot of people who try to be like him, a lot of people who maybe mimic him, and maybe even mock him, but there's only one real Slim Shady. So, Wig, who's the one guy that a lot of people try to emulate, but can never actually reach that height?
They even have, I got to go retired here because guys are still trying to do this, right? And they even got a name for it. They call it getting mossed. Randy Moss is one individual that is absolutely unmatched when it comes. I don't care. You can talk about Calvin Johnson. You can talk about any other tall receiver, but they constantly try to compare guys to Randy Moss, and there ain't but one Randy Moss when you watch those highlights. A dude that he tracked the ball, man, like he was in special forces, right? Like he was one of those combat meteorologists in the Air Force or something. Go look up combat. Go look at those combat meteorologists, and those are some bad dudes, man, because they are like a recon unit establishing fields of fire. Randy Moss was that different. I'll never forget the game against the Jets in New York, where he was on the right-hand side. Tom Brady rolled out to his right, reversed, pivoted, pumped the ball, and Randy started over here. He ran a post. But he had a corner trailing him, he had a safety on top, and he had the safety on the other side of the field. Tom Brady threw it to the left pylon. Randy ran up the field, ran all the way across the field. When Brady let the ball go, he was in the middle of the field. He put it right where Randy had to go get it, and he caught it on this pylon in the end zone. Go watch the play. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. Never seen anything like it. And I think guys, T. Higgins and the rest of them, they just get compared to old Randy Moss, man. But I'm going to tell you something. Now I will tell you this about him and Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice had enough stats that you could combine his, you could take his career and cut it in half, and both of them would have gone in the Hall of Fame. San Francisco Jerry and then the Raiders Seahawk Jerry, they both would have gone in the Hall of Fame. But for a single game, I think Randy Moss is the most talented wide receiver I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
One guy's the GOAT. The other guy was just, on that day, on any given day, there was nobody who ever played that position better than him. He just didn't have as great a career as Jerry Rice.
Randy was a guy that his name was in my head. Lawrence Taylor was another one. You already talked about him. And again, like you said, NFL teams are still looking for the next Lawrence Taylor. I also have Devin Hester in mind as a punt return, right? Everybody wants to be that electric punt return, but there's only one Devin Hester. But I'm going to go current day because you went retired, so I'm going to go current day. And I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill. Because there are fast receivers. There are big 50-50 receivers. There are climb the ladder receivers. But no matter what kind of receiver there's out there in the NFL there is not a receiver in the game today that can change the game the way that Tyreek Hill can change the game. Not saying he does every single time he goes out there. I'm not putting him necessarily in that go above Randy Moss or nothing in conversation. But we look at who's the real singular threat in the National Football League. There's no comp to Tyreek Hill in this game today. There's just not. Maybe that kid from Texas playing for the Chiefs now could become the next one, but until he proves it, he's just not there yet. So I'm gonna go with Tyreek Hill for today's game. Next song, Wig, Without Me. And this song from Eminem, again, one of his more earlier songs, is about the game not being the same without him in it, even though a lot of people hate that he's in it. So that's kind of the angle I want to take with this one. I'm gonna go first, so I can give you a little bit of time to think on it. But basically looking for a player who was crucial to the game in his time, or right now, if he's an active player. I am going retired on this, but was absolutely necessary for the game, whether it be that period, future periods, all periods. And I gotta call out my own father on this one. Rest in peace, Dad. I love you. You know that. I gotta call you out. My dad was the biggest hater of Deion Sanders I have ever met. But man, if this game would not be the same without Deion Sanders in it, and man, if this game didn't need Deion Sanders in it when he was in it. So Deion Sanders, if you talk about Without Me from Eminem, that is a Deion Sanders anthem, because and my dad's not alone. there are so many Dion haters. I mean, that it echoes today, Wig. You know that. There are
Yep.
so many Dion haters. Guess what? Everywhere Dion goes, you kind of look at it and go, but that place needed him. You know what I mean? Like there hasn't been a single place where Dion has landed. All the haters along with it, where you look at that place and go, you can't look at them and say they did not need Dion when they had Dion. So Dion Sanders is my without me player.
All right, mine is a guy that leads a statistical category, and he he's so underappreciated for how good he was. That's Emmitt Smith. And the reason why I say that, because even Bill Parcells says, if I'm picking a running back, I ain't picking him. So there are a lot of guys that were more physically talented. Eric Dickerson, Walter Payton, maybe Walter Payton was more physical, but Jim Brown.
You could argue Ricky Waters is more physically gifted than Emmitt Smith.
Right. But let me tell you something about Emmitt. Emmitt and I graduated around the same time, so I'm showing my age here. I saw him play the only game in high school where he didn't get 100 yards. But it was raining. It was 6 inches of rain on the ground, right? And he had 24 carries for 96 yards. He averaged 250. And when I saw him, I said, he's just bigger than us. Because he was built like a grown man. He was 200 pounds, in high school. I said, he's just bigger than us, man. He just got big legs, and he looks like all of our, uncles up here. When he gets to college, he ain't going to do nothing. So they play Alabama at Legion Field, and I think he goes for like 248 as a freshman. And I'm like, yeah, so I watched him in college, and he was down there at the same time my best friend played basketball for the University of Florida. So my buddy would tell me stories from practice that he heard about. It's like, you keep underestimating me if you want to. I say, yeah, he's a good college player. He ain't going to be that good in the NFL. Yeah, he was. The dude got 18,000 yards, man. I mean, and every time you turn around, they go, yeah, it's the line. Well, it wasn't the line in college. Wasn't the line when he was the Gatorade High School Player of the Year. This dude that just at every turn just keeps doing stuff that people aren't supposed to do. And there was one Hall of Fame on that Dallas Cowboys starting line, and that was Larry Allen. And by the time Larry Allen got there, Emmitt already had 2 rings. So, that you can't just point to that and say, yeah, Dallas was very good at what they did, but they got Nate Newton off the scrap heap. They got Kevin Gogan off the scrap heap. Eric Williams was a 3rd-round pick. When they say, well, it was the line, you have to understand something about Emmitt's time in Dallas. He had 3 different lines. Derek Kennard and all of these, they kept getting guys from other teams. So Emmitt Smith to me is the dude, man, that I think people don't give him his due and realize how hard it was for him. They always compare him to Barry, and I asked Herman Moore on the radio, would Barry have just followed Moose through those holes? He said no. That's why he came out in goal line. Barry lost more yards than anybody. Right? He wouldn't have done what Emmitt did. Just keep going in there 25 times. Get those 3 yards. He wouldn't have done it. It takes a special player, a special kind of player to do that. He had eyes in the back of his head. You think he got him, he'd stop. And he's like, how the hell did he know that dude was there? There's something special about a guy that gets 18,000 yards in that league, bro. And people can take it away from him all day. 18,000 in that league? I don't care who you play for and who's blocking for you. That's almost impossible.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, you gotta remember, defenses were built bigger back then. Like it was hard to run through them, hard to run around them. They were just in the way. You know what I mean? They were just in the way. But you had speed and wheels, and I'm not trying to take away anything from Barry, because Barry's a GOAT as well. He's a legend as well. But it was a little bit easier back then to run around defenses and tire them out than it was to run through them. And Emmitt certainly went the hard way. Wig, one last song before we get out of here. So we're going to do Eminem's top 5 again, according to High Snobiety. I don't know what their name is. But the song is The Way I Am. And basically, Wig, what I'm looking for is a player that no matter what, like we look at like the Tom Brady's of the world. They're all business in front of the mic. They're all business in front of the camera, but they're different people when the cameras are off. But these dudes, these type of dudes, the Way I Am dudes, are just them. Cameras, no cameras, mics, no mics, football, no football. They are who they are. Who you got, Wig? Who's your The Way I Am NFL player?
Antonio Brown. No doubt about
it. I knew it.
You knew I was going. You knew I was coming back to it. I said, as soon as he mentioned something where I could throw AB in there, I'm going to do it, man. Antonio Brown. He made no apologies about who he was, but guess what? I told people he had a 5 or 6 year run, unlike anything I've ever seen at wide receiver. They put his numbers in 5 years against Randy Moss's, and outside of touchdowns, he got him everywhere else. So yeah, it's AB. Sometimes you got to take it for what it is, man. I give
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin all kinds of credit for keeping all that crazy bottled up for a decade, right?
That dude seriously was the way he was. I'm gonna go Rob Gronkowski. Rob Gronkowski just is Rob Gronkowski. Don't matter. Millions. He could be making millions. He could be poorer than poor, famous, unfamous, football, no football. Rob Gronkowski is just Rob Gronkowski. So this was a really fun episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed it. I think we had a lot of fun doing
Absolutely.
that. So again, in honor of Eminem's next, maybe last album, The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace. If you want to make fun of my lack of French speaking ability, go ahead and do that too. Make sure you come back Monday. Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens will be back with a whole new episode, kicking off a whole new week here at Locked On NFL. So make sure you're subscribed. And for your second listen of the day, check out Locked On Jags, Locked On Commanders. Stay right here. Check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 sports streaming channel on YouTube. As always, thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listener, first view today and every day. Every dayers. Thanks for coming through. Thanks for sticking with us through this Eminem ride of lunacy. For Tony Wiggins, I'm David Harris, and we will see you right back here next Friday for another episode of Locked On NFL, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.